Missed an episode of your favorite podcast? Choose from over a decade of content in our archives, not just the latest episode. All free at GCNlive.com.
This is your call to action. Get prepared, America. Economy, survival, energy, disasters. This is USAPrepares.com. Informative radio, educational radio. Interact now by emailing instructor@USAPrepares.com or text at 434-390-7953. Class, please take your seats. Now, your instructor, Vincent Finelli.
Welcome to USA Prepares. This is your captain speaking, John Regan. It's been 2 or 3 months since been on the air with you. It's good to be back again, and Vincent is having to take the day off today. If you want to get the notes as we go along, my website is thefinancialstateoftheunion.com. I know that's really long, but it's hard getting good domain names nowadays. And we're on the news tab, and the post at the top is Resources for USA Prepares, January 16th. With me today, Stephen Heuer. You with us, Stephen?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Yeah, I said good morning to you.
I guess it was while I was being potted up. Well, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself and your contact information before we get started?
Okay, my name is Stephen Heuer. I'm a degree nutritionist called a Nutripath. I've been in private practice 28 years, going on 29. I've helped people overcome the full constellation of health issues, whether it's cancer or osteoporosis or arthritis. I've helped them to heal from those things, and so I basically take on the hardest cases and help people figure out how to nutritionally restore health to their body. My website address is Synergistic, SYNERGISTIC, nutrition.com.
Thanks. Today I've got a wide range. I definitely want to get into a lot of things I've discovered about our bodies, but I've also got a financial update, which, given the state of things, isn't good. And before that, I'm starting off, the link is called To Freeze or To Fraud. That is the question. It's a way of getting your credit report an F, freeze or fraud alert. And there was a new law that took effect on September 21st that has an impact for you. And this really hit home to me last week when I got an alert that a hard inquiry had hit my credit report for one of the agencies, and it's not something that I had initiated. It was actually for Verizon North Texas here, and I hadn't even left the house to go anywhere. No idea how that appeared. So I talked to Verizon. They have a real nice fraud office. Got things taken care of with them, and then the next step was figure out what am I going to do to help protect my credit reports, and researching which one of these to do. Anybody can initialize a fraud alert. What that does is it requires companies to verify that you're you before they do anything. It doesn't stop things like marketing and all of that. So if you still want to especially receive those, or you don't want to go through the hassle of unfreezing your credit to do things, then a fraud alert is a nice way to go. With the law change, it's in effect for 1 year now. It used to be just 90 days. Another advantage is once you issue the alert with one of the three agencies, they automatically contact the other two. And if you are a victim of identity theft, there's another process you can go through which requires filing a police report, and you also have to go through a government website, which unfortunately right now is down because of the government shutdown. But if you go through that process, you can have this fraud alert active for 7 years. One of the other nice things that they did with this new law, it allows you to put freezes on your credit report. And that way nobody can pull it without you unfreezing it first. And while that really locks it down, it also makes it rather inconvenient. You have to initialize these with each of the three agencies individually, so it's 3 times the work. And then anytime, not just applying for credit, anytime your credit report is needed, like if you go to rent an apartment or buy insurance, possibly even apply for a job, if they're going to pull your credit report, you're going to have to unfreeze it. And if you don't know which one they're specifically going to pull, you're going to have to unfreeze all 3. And then once they're done, you're going to have to go back and freeze them again. At least with the new law, it no longer costs you to do that. The freezing and unfreezing is free. It used to be that it was free to freeze, but anytime you wanted to unfreeze, depending on which state you lived in, it was anywhere from free to a fee. So I wanted to make everyone aware of that, nice tools you have for you. But also, if you or anybody in your family has young children, and that includes all the way up to 18, make sure that they go in and put a credit freeze on all 3 agencies for each of the children, because identity thieves love to go after those, because typically you're not running a monitoring service on your children, so they can destroy credit on your kids for a period of years. And then when they get ready to graduate high school and go on to life, they find out that they can't do very much because they've been a victim of identity theft, and that can take months or years to get straight. So do your children or grandchildren a favor, make sure they have credit freezes in effect. Any comments, Stephen?
How common is identity theft? I mean, I don't hear about it very often. Is that a common thing?
An event happens every 2 seconds in America.
Wow.
And you read that it's getting to the point now where it's more than just somebody going through your trash, or one of the other favorite ways. It's like you're in a restaurant and you give your credit card to a waiter or waitress, and they take it and to pay for your check, and they can just run that through a skimmer and grab the credit card information. Or some places like ATMs, even gas stations, you pay at the pump. Some people have put skimmers in, and some of these that have happened here in Dallas have been gas stations at very busy intersections. And you slide your card in there and captures the information. Then you've got like the Experian breach that happened last year. Hundreds of thousands, if not millions of records at once. It's various aspects. There was a hotel chain had to report recently. Guest information was taken that may have included passport information even, so they're paying for replacing passports for people. So, it definitely pays to be proactive on it. I had several alert systems in place. So one of them was through LastPass, which I used to store my passwords. I'd also signed up with Experian to monitor because I was part of that credit breach. And I also signed up for Credit Karma, which is a free service, and they will monitor. And that was actually the first alert I got was through Credit Karma telling me that I'd had this inquiry done on my account. So, yeah, it's unfortunately common, and the way the system works, it's geared to help the identity thieves and punish the people whose identity's been stolen.
Do you have, like, on your website, a place where all this is written for people to sort of, like, go back and, you know, review it? That if they haven't taken notes or anything, do you have a place on your site where you've got this posted?
Right. The first link on the post today, to freeze or to fraud, that is the question. That links to an article on the FTC website that discusses a little bit about the new laws, the free credit freezes, the fraud alerts. Also, if you're in the military, you can put in an active duty alert, and that's kind of a step where you can. It's not a full explanation, but it gives you a pretty good overview of how all this works and what the new laws do for you.
How much does Credit Karma charge per month for their service?
The Credit Karma is free.
Oh, okay. That's great.
You also get your credit score for free.
Okay.
There's other places that do monitoring. Some offer insurance. Some offer assistance if your identity is stolen. Like I say, if you really want to lock it down, you can go through the freeze. And I'm trying not to go that far because it is inconvenient if you're trying to do things like you normally do. I may actually go through that process. I haven't decided yet, but I do have the fraud alert in place, which makes it more difficult since, the businesses are required to verify that you're you, which you think that's something they would do anyway if they're going to conduct business with you, but that's not the way it is. If somebody just comes in with an application, they don't need to verify anything else. So,
okay.
This is John Regan with Stephen Heuer. We'll be back after this break. John Regan with Stephen Heuer. Hope you're enjoying the show today, even though some of the news isn't the best. I also want to mention I have another website, eze33.org, which is a whole lot shorter, and there's a news tab there. If you click that link, it will also direct you over to the post for today.
Can you spell out your website for me, John?
eze33.org. That's short for Ezekiel 33.
EASY? E33.org?
EZE.
33.org?
Yep. EZE.
That's why I wanted you to spell it, because it was not clear.
EZE, the abbreviation for Ezekiel. So that's where that came from.
Okay.
And you can take that link for the FTC and, post it to Facebook or email it to friends and family. And you might just want to mention, make sure you do this for your kids as well so that their identities aren't stolen before they get a chance to use them.
Yeah, that would be a great advantage. I mean, I know credit scores are a big deal. So if that's happening for kids and no one knows about it, that's a big deal for sure.
Yeah, it's the world we live in. Now, I'll go ahead and move down to the next link. Are we due for a micronova? And this takes you to a playlist on the Suspicious Observer YouTube channel. I know a number of you already get the daily space weather from over there. So if you think a CME is bad, imagine a CME on steroids, and that is a micronova. We're probably familiar from school talking about stars, how eventually they'll, die and go nova on you. Well, that's not all that stars do. And this micronova has a large ejecta of material come out, and this particular playlist is entitled Earth Catastrophe Cycle. Currently there's 11 videos in there. He's still releasing more in this series. And when I started out on this, I had no idea this was the direction that this series was going. And just understanding what we'd be facing from that, we already know, with the CME, that a large amount of the world would have electrical grids destroyed.
Right.
I say pretty much everybody that's listened to USA Prepares knows about the Carrington event. And this is much worse than that. And if it happens, even if an event smaller than the Carrington event happened now, we'd be hurting because our magnetic shield is weaker than it's been. So it doesn't take as big a storm to cause the same problems. Well, there's a lot of things that go on, and the video that's released yesterday was the Earth Catastrophe Cycle pole shift. And one, it talks about the magnetic poles, which, in fact, there was just news in the last few days where they had to issue an emergency update. They were supposed to issue it, I don't remember if it was 2019, 2020, but they had to issue it early because the poles have been moving faster, so that it's now outside the tolerance for navigation purposes. And the North Pole is heading towards Siberia. The South Pole has already left Antarctica, and those two are wanting to meet somewhere around Indonesia, which is on the opposite end of the Earth from the South Atlantic anomaly. And that's just the magnetic part. When we get back, we'll talk about what happens if the surface of the Earth actually shifts. John Regan, Stephen Heuer, we'll be back in a few minutes. This is John Regan, sitting with Vincent with Stephen Heuer. We were talking about the Earth Catastrophe Cycle series going on the Suspicious Observers YouTube channel. And I had heard a theory of how the Earth's crust could shift, likening it to an orange because the crust of the Earth is fairly thin, and the way it's set up, there is interaction with the mantle, so things pretty much stay in place. And I've heard discussed how that crust could shift on its own and end up in a different location, which means what we consider the equator now would be somewhere else, and probably not parallel to where it is today. And I kind of dismissed that a little because things just don't happen on their own. It takes something else, whether it's, a close by pass of a planet or a collision with a large object. This gives you another perspective of that, because with this mini nova cycle, which is about 12,000 years, and guess what? That was almost 12,000 years ago last time. The energy provided by that could be enough to loosen up those bonds between the crust and the mantle. And if that happens, now you've got, a couple of things. One, when you've got this when you consider the whole electromagnetic model of the solar system, not just the gravity and the physical part of the physics, with the electrical part, the spin of the Earth is even affected by the magnetism from the sun. So if this type of event happens, it could even stop the spin or slow it down considerably, in which case that's get, the oceans continue going because of inertia, which you can end up with very large waves passing over the land. You can end up with lots of cracks. Volcanism, sounds a lot like some of the stories we have from Velikovsky and the like. And then with the ice at the poles wanting to, with the crust wanting to equalize the weight distribution, and that would want to go more towards the equator, that could basically move what we consider the map of the Earth today to a whole different configuration. And naturally, that would be extremely catastrophic for life on Earth. It's something that's very difficult to prepare for, because you, even if you know what's coming, you don't know what you're going to end up with. But this mini nova type event would help explain things like the vitrified stone relics that we have around the world. This could have very easily been a micronova, it's just basically destroying these stone structures, melting the stone. So, like I said, I can't really give you advice for surviving this. Obviously, the best skill sets that you have, raising food and the like, are important. Obviously, the grid would be gone. All the supply chain would be gone. Then what makes it even more interesting is you don't even know what your climate is going to be. And whereas plants and animals pretty much like a particular climate, whatever you have ready for where you are may not even be what you need. So very, very challenging if we have to live through one of these. Obviously, if this happened in that recent past, a certain number of humans did make it through there. But, I found this very interesting. There's a lot more than what I've talked about. I've got 11 videos in the series already, and obviously we can't even cover that in a 2-hour radio show. Stephen?
Yeah, when you can't do nothing about it, I give it up to God. I mean, it's my studies of the subject of, the cosmos and stuff, and all that I've read and learned is that we've got a lot of extraterrestrial friends out there in cloaked craft that, basically have prevented nuclear war. I mean, they've stopped. We've tried to launch before. The Russians have tried to launch before, and the ships will just come over and stop the launch sequence and deactivate the ability to even blow up the bomb. And there's been other, solar events and stuff that we've been protected from. I mean, there's been cataclysms that could have happened a long time ago that I believe, based on all that I've learned and read, and government insider information where they reveal what's really going on, that we're being protected by a lot of ETs that like us and want to see to it that we don't destroy ourselves, or don't have a worldwide cataclysmic event. And that's my philosophy. So I don't worry about those kinds of things, And if the world was to have that kind of an event, we're all souls, we're all immortal souls, and nobody dies in God's kingdom. I mean, you all go to the spiritual world, and you might have to incarnate on another planet later, but reincarnation is pretty much proven. So I don't worry about dying either.
It is interesting. If you look at what's termed as Ezekiel's fire, prophecy for the end time. I've read people that have studied that, basically contending that the only thing in the solar system that could cause that is the sun. And short of the sun going nova, which isn't expected for quite some time, this micronova type event certainly would fit in that type of context. I say, very interesting. I really do recommend the series if you try to want to understand not only our past but our future, and you start seeing some of the science behind it. I really like the work he does, because even if you just want to take the health aspect, the link between space weather and human health is being established. It's being studied. Space weather is, depending on what it is, can increase heart attack risk. It's very, very interesting. But before we run out of time this hour, I do want to get into a bit of a financial update. And one of the links I provided here is flashback before the 2008 crisis. And this is a speech done by Richard Fisher, who was president of the Dallas Federal Reserve Bank. I considered him one of the good guys in the Federal Reserve arena. And he gave this speech on April 26th, 2007. And I don't believe this is the one that I had read, but this is the first one with the updated information from the Social Security and Medicare Trustee Report. That was the one I first read about from him. So it was sometime between April 2007 to early 2008 when he gave one of these speeches. And when I read the real status, it just blew me away, because at this point, just to put things in context, our national debt was still single digit. It wasn't very long before it hit 10 trillion, but it was below that then. But the unfunded liabilities, when you add up the various parts of Medicare plus Social Security, we were looking at 68 trillion back then. And I'm reading that going, that's so huge. We cannot handle something that big. And here we are 12 years later, and our national debt is getting ready to hit $22 trillion, which is probably going to happen this month, even with the government shutdown. Total debt in the United States is $72 trillion. Using the generally accepted accounting principles version of the unfunded liabilities in Social Security and Medicare, that's now in the neighborhood of 122 trillion versus the 68 trillion. And when you look at what Professor Kotlikoff does, the last report he did, he was saying, using the Congressional Budget Office projections, which are a whole lot more realistic than what's published in the trustee reports, that it would be in the neighborhood of $220 trillion of the unfunded liabilities for Social Security and Medicare. And that doesn't include, additional trillions for all these pension funds that are having problems. What I didn't understand back then, that was before I started my master's in finance, is these numbers you see for the unfunded liabilities, that's the present value. So that is how much you would have to invest today, earning whatever interest rate that they did the calculation with, in order to meet the projected costs. And that's assuming their assumptions are good. If their assumptions are bad, it can be even worse. and finish this up when we get back from the break. John Regan at the controls today with try and finish up this financial update so we can talk about health issues on the next hour. Just to put this in perspective, if you have that $220 trillion liability, and I read where Professor Kolikoff calculated that with a 3.9% interest rate, which is actually below what interest rates used to be, that if you just wanted to keep the unfunded liabilities from getting worse, that would be over $8 trillion a year that would need to be invested at 3.9% just to keep that steady. That is so much above what's available, even if you taxed 100% of all income, with what's already being used out of that income, there's just not enough left. It's a totally unsustainable situation. And since the government shutdown is hot news right now over a $6 billion funding for a wall, if you look at that, $200 trillion for Social Security and Medicare versus $6 billion for a wall, which are numbers we can't understand. Let me try and get them more human for you. If the Social Security and Medicare problem would cost $1,000 to fix, this border wall would be 3 cents. That is the magnitude of the problem. The next link down there, called Zombies Are Us, one of the things that show the condition that we're in, and I'm seeing the wheels starting to wobble really bad all over the place, mass layoffs. Germany is technically in a recession now. Lots of stuff pointing that we're getting ready to have that fun times like they did during the Depression. In this article, we see where the Bank of International Settlements went through a database of 32,000 public companies in 14 different economies. And their definition of a zombie business is that it's at least 10 years old, and the interest coverage ratio has been below 1 for 3 consecutive years. Now, that's financial talk. Basically, what it means is that these companies for 3 years have not brought in enough profit to cover their interest payment. That is not good. And when they went through this, 12% of the public companies they examined couldn't pass that test. And as recession kicks in and situations get worse, more and more companies are going to be in that situation, and they can't live that way for long periods of time. The other thing going on is that, we're in that era where the national debt is increasing more and more. The link I have there is what happens when the government can only afford interest. There's a section about halfway down, interest costs will exceed tax revenue, projecting, looking at a $40 trillion debt in 2025. But when you look at an interest rate, in this case, they're using 10%, since, who wants to loan money if you're just going to lose it? That would be $4 trillion per year in interest, which is about double what would be brought in with tax revenue. So whatever you want to do on the projection, you can come up with different numbers, but you can pretty easily deduce that within 10 years, we're going to be in a position where the federal government would have to borrow money just to pay interest on the debt. That's not paying for any military, any of the normal services that the government does. Social Security and Medicare are separate, but those that have limitations as well. John Regan, Steve Heuer, wrap this up and start talking about health in the next hour. Captain John Regan sitting in for Vincent today. If you're following along, The website is thefinancialstateoftheunion.com. We're on the news tab, which has today's post. The shorter address, eze33.org. That's short for Ezekiel 33. And the news link there will take you to the same place. We were talking about a number of things like just wrap that before we get into the health. With me today, Stephen Heuer. Why don't you go ahead and give out your website, and then as we go along the health issues, you can also jump in ways you can help people in that respect.
Sure. Again, that website is Synergistic, SYNERGISTIC, nutrition.com, and our phone number is 888-988-3325.
When I emailed Vince the topics for today, I told him I think I can get it fit in 5 or 6 hours. That's how much material there is. We could take at least this hour talking about how we can use the Great Depression as a guide, but there's a lot of differences. I guess to put it as briefly as possible, the best things you can do is be out of debt, hopefully secure an income, because the place you work may not stay in business. It's good to have skills and be in the process of raising some or all of your own food. And, just based on the past, as this progresses, you're going to see more unemployment, which is also going to lead to more homelessness and more hunger. And, that happened in America less than 100 years ago. And, we get to see that again pretty soon.
Hey, John, what do you think about the idea? I've heard talk from, financial experts saying that it looks like Trump might go back to a gold standard and get rid of the, this artificial debt, get rid of the Federal Reserve Bank and the IRS altogether. Do you have any confidence in that ever happening?
Even if they got rid of the Federal Reserve, and even if you went to a gold standard, it wouldn't solve the problems.
But isn't the debt that you're speaking of just purely fabricated out of thin air, and it's artificial, and just like Federal Reserve Bank, international, whatever, all the different central banks of the world basically making money out of thin air, so it's fiat currency that's not valid.
That's true, but the thing is, it's not the banks that hold that. A lot of that is into the pension funds.
Huh.
So if you say, let's cancel the debt, screw the bankers, the bankers aren't holding the debt. And we already know pension funds are in bad shape. So if you cancel the debt, the pension funds are even worse shape. And even if you manage to get around that hurdle, we still have the problem of the unfunded liabilities for the promises we've made. We cannot keep the promises of Social Security and Medicare. You either have to raise the age of eligibility to the point where, people only get it for a few years if they're lucky to live that long. We don't have the financial wherewithal to raise it because, I didn't talk about this time, but $220 trillion, that's more than double all the money in the world. And even if you had all the money in the world, where do you go to invest it at that interest rate? It's an impossible situation. And the only other choice, which can be done a number of ways, is kill the old people. It's just, trying to, attack this financial anthill doesn't take care of the mountain.
Why can't all the pensions and stuff basically be funded by the replacement from fiat currency to gold-backed currency or silver and gold-backed currency?
Well, first off, the reason that Nixon closed the gold window is if he hadn't, we would have gone bankrupt then because our balance of trade was bad. And France really pushed this, wanting gold instead of, paper dollars. And when you're out of gold, what do? That's the thing with the gold standard, and it's not like it's not like it's an easy conversion. And I don't have the numbers in front of me, but I wrote a piece called, I can't remember the title now, but it's basically returning to a gold standard. And in my book, it's just the United States based on the gold reserves we have, which is just a few $1 billion worth of gold, even at today's fiat currency exchange rate. And you're looking at trillions of dollars of liabilities, so big mismatch there.
Have you ever heard of Karen Hughes? Have you ever heard of Karen Hughes and her whole message regarding this stash of gold that's supposed to be returned back to the U.S.?
That totally goes against every bit of scientific information I found on, the amount of gold in the world. There would have to be so much more than, and even if that were true, now you're talking about a commodity that all of a sudden you've had much, much more of it. So when you have more of a commodity, what's going to happen to the price of it? It's going to go down.
Right.
So even if that were true, there's, I don't want to get in the side trip of some of the issues with that source, but what gets me is they say they've got these trillions of dollars worth of gold from antiquity. Well, if that's true, then how come they're so inept with that trillions of dollars worth of gold that they can't even counter what Soros, who is a measly billionaire, is doing to ruin countries? It just lacks so much credulity. But if you wanted to convert the world back to a gold standard, there's only one of two ways of doing it. Either you have to put the price of gold to a point where it would cover all of the money that's out there. And I forget what the number is, but it was into the five figures. I remember it was $10 trillion or $10,000 or $30,000 an ounce is what gold would have to go for. The other way is the way it was, is he set gold at a certain price. It used to be $20 an ounce before FDR confiscated the gold and devalued the dollar. And if you go back to that rate, then for every $100 of fiat currency you have, you're getting, I think it's less than 10 cents worth of the new money. So it's a tremendous shock just to try to do that. And like I say, it doesn't even address the unfunded liability problem. Even if you solve the debt problem, which for the United States is now over $70 trillion, and then the next report that we see, it was $247 trillion last time. It'll be over $250 billion for the world when this next report comes out.
Okay, it sounds like something that's maybe you could talk about a solution on another show. Maybe we could get into the health issues now.
Yeah, but just kind of related to this, one of the reasons we have this problem is we don't believe what God told us. As I was researching all of these problems way back, 2007, 2008, 2009, I'd see sooner or later a satanic connection to the problems we have and how God gave us an answer. If we
agreed.
We did things the way God said, we wouldn't have the income disparity, we wouldn't have the debt level, because he gave us a way to manage that.
I agree.
Well, he also gave us ways of how we're supposed to handle the body, but we don't do that either.
Right.
And we're now reaping the benefits of that, and those are negative benefits. We talk about the sad diet, the standard American diet. I think it should be, retitled the suicidal American diet.
That's a good one.
Because you look at what we're eating now, and I've actually made up an acronyms for this. You know, you have a choice of food, FOOD, and I call that fresh, organic, of deity, the stuff that God said we're supposed to eat. Mm-hmm. Instead, we have crap, CRAP, consumable retail acquired product.
Wow.
And this stuff, you know, I did a show a little over a year ago talking about the problems I was experiencing with excess insulin and excess iron, which was in the form of ferritin. And when you have the excess insulin, you get the insulin resistance, which means that blood sugar ends up backing up in your blood, which is what most doctors measure. They don't measure the insulin. And as that happens, you start having problems with the cell itself because it's not getting the energy that it wants. Plus, that process also allows nutrition to get into the cell, so you're now malnourishing the cells. And you know, I spent 2 hours just on those two issues, and I've discovered so much more since that you know, it kind of blows your mind.
How's your blood sugar now and your iron levels now?
Well, I've made improvements on both. When I found out, you know, what it was, we cut out sugar and things, and much better. Still got a ways to go, and we'll talk about that when we get back from the break. This is John Regan with Stephen Heuer. You know, we're talking about you know, my blood sugar and iron level, and Becky had the same problems. We've got them much better. With the iron, there's, and both of us were at hemochromatosis levels, which is a ferritin level of over 300 for a man and over 200 for a woman. And while you can chelate a little bit out, when you're that high, the only real way you can do it is to give blood. And unfortunately for me, because of my Air Force service in Germany, I'm permanently banned from donating blood, so I had to get a prescription. And just under a year ago, I had 3/4 of a gallon taken in 6 weeks.
Wow.
And that got my ferritin levels down below the really damaging level. Since then, I've seen another study that if you're a frequent blood donor, which was defined as 4 or more times a year, versus an infrequent blood donor, which was 2 or less times a year, the ferritin level is even lower than what Dr. McCullough has been recommending. And even Dr. McCullough, in his latest article about this, has lowered what he considered the healthy range for ferritin. And that's one of those tests that doctors typically don't run. And if you go back and look at my post from last year, you'll see those tests. And in 45 of the 50 states, you can go online and order it. And I think the ferritin test is $20-some, so it's not a real expensive test, and you don't even have to fast for that one. A lot of the other tests, you know, the A1C, the blood sugar, if you have normal physicals, you probably get that, but doctors typically don't do a fasting insulin test as well, which tells you how bad your system's out of whack. And in my case, my fasting insulin was as high or higher than it should have been for after eating.
So was it over 200 or something?
It was, I think it got up to 60-something for insulin.
You're measuring insulin, not glucose.
Right. My glucose, based on my A1C, the average would have been over 300, and Becky's would have been nearly 400.
Okay, yeah.
And we hadn't been able to go to the doctor in years, so no telling how it or when it flipped over into that condition. So the good news is, except for the iron part, you can pretty much handle it all yourself. And if you're eligible to donate blood, you can even handle the iron problem. And a couple of things I learned here is you can be anemic and still have too much iron, because that iron test that the doctor normally runs, that's what's in your blood. Ferritin says the iron load in your body. So you can be anemic and still have too much iron, just like you can be diabetic and be thin. Obesity does not cause diabetes. It's the whole process, and in most people that causes the obesity is a side effect of the cause of diabetes. Go ahead.
Yeah, so I was going to say that a lot of people aren't aware that excess iron in the body and anemia can be related to being chronically acidic. So your blood pH, 7.35, 7.45 has to stay in that window, otherwise you risk dying, and the body will sacrifice all the alkaline proteins and minerals in the body in an incremental manner, taking it from the bones, taking it from the tissues, soft tissues, so that no one system is depleted too quickly. So that over the course of decades, you're basically weakening all tissue systems, thinning your discs, wearing down your cartilage, diminishing bone structure, because your body has been chronically acidic. Most people don't know that your saliva pH in the morning when you wake up before you eat or drink or do anything should be 7 to 7.5. And in everybody that I deal with that's sick, it's usually 6.5 to 6 or in the 5 ranges. And so when it's in those ranges, your body's always got a 24-hour alarm going off, stealing alkaline proteins and minerals out of the body to meet the pH needs of the blood. And one of the mechanisms that the body uses to do that is it will sacrifice red blood cells so that histidine, arginine, and lysine can neutralize acids, and thus you're destroying a vast number of red blood cells, and the iron is carrying, causing it to then store excessively in the body and create anemia at the same time. So pH is a part and parcel of fixing that excess iron condition and, stopping the destruction of red blood cells.
And we're back after this break. This is John Regan with Stephen Heuer, and I want to thank you for that discussion you had on the blood cells and iron, because even with everything I've read, that was the first time I heard the mechanism of how that happens. Go ahead.
Yeah. Yeah, that's one thing. And so pH is really important. Otto Warburg won the Nobel Prize for defining how cells respirate, breathe, create energy, and he also was nominated for the Nobel Prize for actually proof positive that basically an acidic environment is a lower oxygen level, which then causes normal cells to convert to tumor cells. So he can take healthy cells, lower the oxygen levels by 35 to 40% for I think it was I can't remember, it's 24 or 40 hours, but some period of time. And then the normal cell that was respirating using oxygen converts over to making energy in the absence of oxygen. And so pH controls oxygen levels. When you're acidic, you have low oxygen levels. When you are alkaline, you have optimum oxygen levels. And this can be, your body can actually have toxins in it too, like mercury and other things where localized, where that toxin is deposited, you can have local acidity and local low oxygen levels, even though your overall pH is good. So the other thing I wanted to say earlier when you commented about this diet, the suicidal diet, that was great. It's much easier for people to choose healthy food when the nervous system is fully nourished. And so I recommend people consider getting 3 things. One is a mineral supplement that we work with called Mineral Magic. It's got the 72 or so trace elements. Your body needs at least 64 on a daily basis to basically activate the codons on the DNA so protein synthesis can happen and metabolic enzymes can be made. The other one is free-form amino acids, so either from poor GI tract development because of not being breastfed or because you're older, lots of reasons. The body doesn't break down protein as efficiently, either because you just didn't develop a good GI tract or because you're older. So the body's lacking in 3 to 5 amino acids all the time in the bloodstream, and this is proven in blood tests, which control blood sugar, which then fuels the brain, and control neurotransmitter levels. So if you take free-form amino acids like All Basic or All Basic Plus, just depends on what you need, 2 to 3 caps, and some B vitamins, you'll all of a sudden make neurotransmitters on a higher level and have plenty of glucose for the brain. So the brain, when it's fully fueled, won't crave stimulation or sedation nutrition. stimulation, nutrition, coffee, chocolate, whatever, sugar, sedation, nutrition, alcohol, marijuana. Basically the body wants to be in balance all the time. So if you're not fully nourished, you're going to either crave stimulation nutrition or sedation nutrition, both in the category but not being real food and being unhealthy for you. And then the other one is fatty acids. Like we have one called 5-star omega EPA DHA. It's got this 5-star word because it's so pure, and you need the EPA DHA. DHA fuels the brain. The brain is largely made of DHA, so you need to continue to supply that building block so the brain can repair itself, and it also controls mood and memory as well. And so when you have a good fish oil supplement like 5-star omega EPA DHA, Mineral Magic, and full-spectrum amino acid supplement like All Basic or All Basic Plus, and a good B complex like Active Bs, you won't crave junk food. You won't crave coffee. You won't crave marijuana. I've had people tell me, I don't crave marijuana anymore just from taking your mineral supplement. I don't crave coffee anymore just from taking your mineral supplement. So, that's an easy way for people that, have the decision in their mind that they don't want to eat these junk foods, but to get rid of the physical craving for it, they have to have those kinds of nutrients in the system so that it's an easy decision mentally to say, I'm not interested in that piece of pie or cake or whatever,
I want to come back to the omega-3s. Let me just go ahead, and there's 2 more links from today's post I want to mention. Medical school nutrition education lacking and long-reaching impact, the sins of the father and mother. The medical school nutrition, if you think you can go to your doctor and get good advice about nutrition, this should pretty much dispel that. This is a link to a study that's posted on the National Institutes of Health website. And the study is from, let's see, where's the date? 2014, June. And they did a survey of medical schools. And on average, overall, medical students received 19.6 contact hours of nutrition instruction. Now, it doesn't say what the content of that instruction was. I imagine some of that went into severe deficiencies like, rickets and scurvy. If you're short of C or D, or D is the rickets, C is the scurvy. So to expect to discuss nutrition with your average MD out there, I'm sorry, you're just not going to get it. If you're lucky to find somebody that took it on themselves to learn about nutrition, you're going to be better off. But also keep in mind, because of the way this whole medical scam is set up, your doctors are prohibited from prescribing natural methods. They can prescribe drugs, but they have to use a separate hat, which is what Dr. Tennant does, to do these natural methods. And then this is one that got me. Just came out on the 14th on the Natural News website. Research reveals that parental experience is epigenetically imprinted onto up to 14 generations. So you think about, I'd already seen discussed how, the health of the grandmother, since a woman is born with her eggs, that means the granddaughter is affected directly by the grandmother's health and the condition. So, for example, if you were growing up during the Great Depression and malnourished, that hit the granddaughter, and that may be part of what we're going through in addition to all the malnutrition and toxins we have today. But to show that these changes, epigenetics is the expression of your genes passing to that many future generations, I found just absolutely amazing. Did you want to comment on that?
Yeah, there's a study done on 900 cats over 10 years where the cats were fed 4 different diets and divided them into groups. And one group is fed raw milk and raw meat. The other group was fed cooked milk and raw meat. The other one was fed raw milk and cooked meat. The other one got 100% cooked. The 100% cooked animals were sterile by the 3rd generation. By the 2nd generation, they were having smaller litters and health issues. The ones that got a mixture of cooked and raw were fairly healthy but still had health issues. The ones that had 100% raw remained healthy from generation to generation. And then the study that was done, I'm trying to think of the guy's name right now that did the study. Not Weston A. Price, but the Price Pottinger. Oh, yeah, Francis Pottinger. That's what his name was. Francis Pottinger did this study on these 900 cats, and the ones that became genetically compromised by basically eating cooked foods, cooked animal proteins, the denatured proteins, and the oxidized fats from those animal proteins, the ones that got the weaker genetics, he started to feed them the raw meat and the raw milk, and it took 4 generations before there was no more deficiencies or defects in the kittens. It took 4 generations of perfect diet, 100% raw milk and raw meat, before there was no imperfections in the animal's body. So it's already been proven in animals, and a lot of people don't realize that food alone is super nutrient deficient, and then you add to that the cooking process, which denatures and destroys so much of what you're eating. That's a burden to the body. When you're young, your body has the liver function to detox the denatured proteins and lipid peroxides, but when you're older, it doesn't detox as well, and these things start building up because you can't excrete all of the damaged toxins from cooking in a 24-hour period, so it starts building up in the tissues, which leads to all these degenerative diseases. And with regards to your diabetes and stuff, there's different things you can do about that. One of them is a product called Stem Enhance Ultra that Vincent's gotten on recently that really is raving about how it's making him feel. But a lot of people that have taken that product that were diabetic have had dramatic improvements. One of them used to have his blood sugar numbers way over 200, and now they're always at 129 or better, or 129. And other people reporting like their gangrene went away, that they were going to have to amputate their foot, and now they didn't have to because they were on this product for a few months. So it's going to help when you raise your stem cell levels, which is what this product does. Then it helps repair your pancreas, so at least your insulin production is better. It helps repair your cell structure, so insulin sensitivity gets restored. And that's one product that works. And then the other is a radical diet that most people won't adhere to. But there's a book called We Want to Live that's the story of a man that had type 1 diabetes and autism and bone cancer, and he reversed them all basically on this raw diet, 100% raw diet, raw vegetable juice, raw milk, raw cheese, raw butter, raw eggs, raw steak, raw chicken. And, basically he developed a diet that's healed a lot of people of their problems because when you eat 100% raw, you're not all that you ingest can be utilized, and there's no toxins, there's no denatured proteins and no lipid peroxides. And so that's a book that can really change your mind. He even helped his son recover from a severe brain injury from a car accident where the son was in a coma and expected to die, and the father came into the hospital and behind the scenes put raw butter and honey in the son's mouth so that it would just melt into the mouth and go down the esophagus. And in 24 hours, he was out of the coma, and he started to feed him this raw diet over the course of a week. And over the course of a week, he was ambulatory, talking, and fairly functional, but then went home to live with mom and resumed being on his cooked food diet and taking the drug Dilantin to prevent seizures. And he made no further progress for the next 4 months. So then he came out to live with his dad and reassumed the diet and got off the drug, and he made 100% recovery. No more, nervous system problems, brain function was normal. So there's a lot of case histories where, it's already been proven this diet's the best diet. And when you're older and you really want your quality of life back, it's something to consider.
And let's jump back to the omega-3s for a minute. Wow, we're getting down to the last segment. We'll come back after this and wrap it up as well as we can. We just need another 3 hours. This is John Regan, Stephen Heuer. Boy, this is going to be a challenging 5 minutes. I do want to mention a book that Dr. Mercola co-wrote, Superfuel, and that's a fantastic discussion on omega-6 and omega-3 fatty acids. I learned so much about the processes, and even how having excess insulin affects the way your body metabolizes those fats. You probably, if you know anything about nutrition at all, you can get omega-3s from plant sources. What you may not know is that your body does a bad job of converting that into the EPA and DHA forms, which your body really needs. Let me just go real quick. We talked about sugar. Fructose is the real bad boy there. I've talked about that a lot. The oils, corn oil, canola oil, all those that you see in the supermarket. There's a few decent ones, when you're dealing with the oils and fats. If you can get the grass-fed butter, you get olive oil, you get coconut oil, and even the good fats can still go rancid. But just processing on those commercials, you start off in a bad position. Iron, and this gets into wheat. You see these enriched products where, cereals, breads, and I earlier show posted video from Dr. Levy where he took cereal, blended it, and used some magnets to show that they're adding iron filings for the iron, which isn't even a great form of iron to use. Trans fat, hydrogenated oil, which basically is used to build your cells, and since it's practically plastic, your cells can no longer hold the electrical charge, which causes other problems. And then we didn't even get a chance to talk about the microbiome. If you look at what you consider your body, if you tally the cells, what you consider human is 1%. The other 99% is your microbiome. And we're destroying that with antibiotics. We're destroying that with things like glyphosate, which even organic wheat products has a significant amount of. We're feeding the bad bacteria with sugars. We typically don't eat enough fiber. And it used to be that the way we preserved food was through fermentation, and that fermentation is one of the things that helps add more of the good bacteria into our system. So it all goes back, we're not doing things God's way, and with industrialization, the processed sugar, the processed oils, the hydrogenated oils, all of that stuff has combined to really, really impact our health. Stephen?
Yeah, I want to clarify, though, that the company Flora, Flora, presses their seed oils, whether it's sesame seed, whether it's flaxseed, whether it's almond. They press it in a no-light environment and no-oxygen environment. So it's a truly viable electron-rich oil stored in dark brown bottles, stored in refrigeration. And that's the kind of oil that you can take therapeutically to get a therapeutic effect, because you've got Joanna Budwig, who had a 90% cancer cure rate in Budapest, in Hungary, in the 1950s, getting people on 6 tablespoons of fresh pressed flax oil a day mixed with a cup of cottage cheese, and they'd eat that throughout the day. And it was the electron-rich flaxseed oil that sort of restored the cell's ability to increase its oxygen uptake. There's a couple of mechanisms by which oxygen enters the cell. One of them is omega-3 and omega-6, provided that it's still an electron-rich, non-oxidized oil, like fresh-pressed flax oil. And so you're right that the body can't convert very much of omega-3 into EPA, DHA for the brain and nervous system. So it's therefore important that people get it dietarily from a good, fish oil supplement. We have one called Rosita cod liver oil that's got the vitamin A, D, and EPA, DHA, and we've also got just the fish oils without the vitamin A and D. So you're right in what you said.
Well, Stephen, thanks for being with me today, and I wish we had more time. We just scratched the surface, so stay tuned for the future.
Thanks.
Thanks.